Welcome to the ChicoBag Podcast, where we talk with change makers working to leave the world better than we found it. I'm your host, Andy Keller, and today I'm joined by Edward Humes, Pulitzer Prize-winning journalist and author of his new book, Total Garbage: How We Can Fix Our Waste and Heal the World. So if you want to know how to heal the world and take care of our waste problem, please listen. Welcome, Edward.
Thanks, Andy. It's so great to be talking to you again.
It is great. So
We go a ways back.
Yeah, I met you when you wrote your first book, Garbology. So now you've written a second book about garbage. So tell me about this new book.
Yeah, well, the first one, Garbology, was focused on trying to figure out just how wasteful we were, because a lot of what we know now in terms of plastic pollution and where our material ends up, things we thought were being recycled were just being shipped to China. All that was new when Garbology came out. And this one, Total Garbage, is just like the subtitle says, it's how much our waste not only plagues us, but offers us an opportunity to solve a lot of our other big crises with climate and environment.
Yeah, so your premise is that waste is the core of most of our problems.
Exactly. Well, first of all, we're the most wasteful civilization in history. Your company is already doing something to address one aspect of that, and that kind of solution is what I wanted to take to the next level and see what else is going on. All the action right now for innovation in solving our environmental problems is really in community-based efforts that grow to be systemic, or that are so popular that they are changing consumer behavior. And that's what I wanted to focus on. Why are we the most wasteful civilization in history? If you drive a gasoline-powered car, 4/5 of what you spend goes out the tailpipe as waste. In terms of waste heat and waste pollutants, only $1 out of $5 you spend on your gas tank is going to move the car. That's crazy wasteful. And we have much better and less wasteful options, which I talk about in the book. And my example is a community in Georgia that has redesigned itself to make the primary everyday form of transportation an electric golf cart. And they have a separate little, it's not little, 100 miles road network. It's a 40,000 person community, not a retirement community. And everybody still has their car. If they need to go to Atlanta for the day or do a big shopping expedition, they rev up their gas guzzler and go. But mostly they drive short distances like all Americans, and they don't need all that horsepower or range to get the job done. And they are the happiest community. They have low insurance rates. They have zero traffic fatalities, and their kids go to high school at age 15 and a half. It's a rite of passage. They get to drive themselves in the golf cart. The high school has over 1,000 of these golf carts lined up every day. The parking lot's even striped for them. It's the craziest thing I've ever seen. I thought it was nutty when I got there. I thought there's no way a golf cart could be be a substitute for my car. And I left there thinking, God, my car is a crappy substitute for a golf cart. Because that's really how we drive. And that's just one little example of the hidden waste in our daily lives. We don't even think of how wasteful it is to have a car that can carry 6 people and go 300 miles without having to refuel or recharge. Most Americans don't drive more than 40 miles a day with one person in the car.
I mean, I'm someone who's driven a golf cart, and I got to say they're a lot more fun to drive. You can feel the wind. Yeah, especially on a nice day. You can say hi to people. You can notice the butterflies and things that are next to you. It is really enjoyable. So
I drove around with the mayor, and there's somebody I need to talk to, and they had a meeting, golf cart to golf cart, right in the middle of the road. There was nobody cared. Can you see doing that on the freeway? No.
So
it turns it into a social experience.
Yeah, well, you connect more. We're living in a time where people are lonelier than ever, and it sounds like a great solution to bring the
Not
community
in
together.
Peachtree
Get to
City,
know.
Georgia. Yeah. So I've said I spoke about that example first because um, we don't know. We need to expand. I argue we need to expand how we define waste and see it clearly. Now, sometimes we just have to drive that big car to do things, but there's no reason why you have to do that for everything.
Yeah.
And it's changing the wastefulness inherent in how we get ourselves around now could be world changing.
Well, I like how you put it. Like I'm spending maybe in California $5 on a gallon of gas, and only one of those dollars is actually moving me around. Like that. That's pretty compelling.
It doesn't matter what car either. That's the physics of internal combustion. There's no way around it. It's the same thing with fossil fuel power plants. They waste 2/3 of the energy. So 2/3 of your electricity bill every month goes for the waste inherent in the way we generate electricity, which is one of many reasons why wind and solar power are now the cheapest forms of energy there are, because that waste of fuel doesn't exist.
Yeah, it's a lot more efficient. You said something like 90% of the
Electric car, 90% of the energy that comes out of that battery turns the wheels. So yeah, moves your car.
compared to 20% for internal combustion.
Correct.
So that's huge. I mean, it's like a no duh. So what's preventing us from just making the switch?
Because we're trying to make them just like our gas guzzling cars, for which a very amazing logistic network for refueling exists. And we're trying to make electric cars do the same thing when we don't need them to do. I mean, we would be best served by some modern equivalent of the Volkswagen Bug, which was $1,600 when I was a teenager to buy a brand new one. And it's not a perfect car. It's small, it's underpowered, but if you just have to go to the store or drive to work, it was awesome. It was so cheap. Well, an electric equivalent of that could go maybe 100 miles. You wouldn't need a big honking half ton of or full ton of lithium to power it around. You could get by on pretty low tech batteries and as like a golf cart, but a little bigger. Nobody's even thinking in those terms. Most
Yeah.
families in America have two vehicles. Why do we need both of them capable of this massive amounts of range and power and carrying 5 people in 4 suitcases and whatever else a modern car can fit in it? We don't. We just don't think that way.
Yeah. And I've listened to some futurists from Lyft, and they were talking about the idea of autonomous vehicles and why even own a vehicle when it sits in your driveway, for 90% of the time. And it's just sitting there rotting basically and something you have to maintain. Why not just order up, a car when you need it? And then the result is you don't need all these parking places, you don't need parking lots, and you can free up, all that infrastructure for better things. Um,
Yeah, it's a different way of thinking.
Yeah.
A car is absolutely any investment banker will tell you a car is the worst investment you'll ever make. It begins to depreciate the moment you drive it off the lot, and it's hugely expensive between insurance, parking, fuel, maintenance. It's an expensive proposition. So if you don't need that, if you can just have a car appear when you need it and drop you
Yeah.
off when you're done, that would be game changing too. And it's just we're so emotionally attached to our vehicles. And I get that. I love to drive. I'm not a car hater. I like cars.
Yeah.
That doesn't mean I can't see the illogic and waste in it. I have the most popular electric vehicle in the world right now, an e-bike. And that is in terms of numbers sold, it is. And that is a huge problem solver for a lot of people, particularly young people who can't afford or don't want a full size car or live in an apartment where parking is an issue. Goes away and gets them where they need to go.
it is a game changer. I've ridden my bike, and some of the obstacles that get in my way are mental ones. I think, oh, I don't have time to ride my bike, and what I found is that I actually get to the location faster, or maybe it takes me 5-10 minutes longer than it would otherwise, and I get some exercise in the process. So it's
Exactly.
yeah. So
You're turning
cars
waste
is
into
one
a
thing.
boon.
Say it again.
You're turning waste into a boon, into a bonus. I mean, that's awesome.
Yeah, that's for sure. And then I don't have to drive to the gym. Yeah. So you talked about cars. I know in your book, what really surprised me was the part about cooking. So
Yeah.
so let's talk about that, because that was fascinating.
Well, yeah, and it has a couple pieces. The one I think most people are aware of is that we waste a lot of actual food, right? Like 40% of our food supply from farm to table ends up in the trash in one form or another. And that's horrendous. And then there's how we actually cook our food. And I focused on a couple of chefs who are really pushing for electrifying our commercial kitchens, our restaurant kitchens, and our home kitchens with a new old technology called induction cooking. And when I started working on this, nobody knew what that was, and now if I'm speaking to a group, I say, "Who knows what an induction stove is or has one?" A lot of hands go up. So
Oh, that's
people have
good.
realized that this is cool. And for those listeners who don't know what it is, it's basically cooking with magnetism instead of with fire or heat. And this is, if you have a wireless phone charger, you have an induction device. And you notice how it gets warm when you put your phone on it and it's charging the battery. It's the process of induction for your phone charger. A byproduct is heat. In an induction stove, that's the only product. And all that happens on an induction stove is that a magnet projects a very focused magnetic field into the bottom of a pot. It has to be a pot that a magnet will stick to, steel or cast iron or any kind of pot that's clad in one of those two metals. And most of that energy in a phone charger goes into the battery in the phone. It has nowhere to go inside a pot. And so the electrons just start bouncing around crazily and it gets intensely hot. You can boil water twice as fast with an induction stove as you can from a top of the line gas stove. And once
So you can
again,
actually
it's like,
watch water. You can actually watch water boil.
yes, you can. And and it happens really fast. Everything is faster. So this chef, Chris Galarza is his name. He's based in Pittsburgh, and his killer demo is to take a pan out of the freezer and put it on an induction stove, and he is sizzling and sauteing vegetables faster than a gas stove cooker does it when the pan's already pre-warmed. That's how powerful this stuff is. And why are restaurants interested in this? Because if you ever watch the show Bear on Hulu, or it's a cooking drama, or if you ever worked in a restaurant, that time is money. Time is everything in a restaurant. The more quickly you can serve your customers, the more customers you can serve. They finish, they're happy, they'll want to come back because they didn't wait, and then there's room for the next customers. You can actually fit an extra hour's worth of service without expanding the time you set aside for service, in part because things cook faster, in part because they clean faster. The stove doesn't get hot. The kitchen stays cool. And that means grease spatter and all doesn't have to be scrubbed off with chemicals. You just wipe it off with a sponge when you're done. Only the food and the pot get hot. It's crazy.
So that's. I mean, it's kind of mind blowing, really, that it seems like some sort of future technology. Where the stove's not getting hot, it's cooking your food. It cooks it twice as
Not
fast.
microwaves, though. It's nothing like that. There's no radiation. That's the cool part. They
Yeah. So do
demonstrated this
people need
at
to
the
be worried about it?
Yeah. It's not like that at all. And it's not those coils on the old school electric stove or like the ceramic top electric stoves where you can burn yourself because you can't tell if it's on or not. And, it's nothing like that. It doesn't make any heat. That's why it's so energy efficient. Again, it's like cars. About 85 to 90% of the energy an induction stove uses actually cooks the food. With a gas stove, you're lucky if you get 35% of the heat that stove generates to cook the food. So you have to spend a lot more energy, and that's why kitchens are so hot. You know, Chris said the reason I got interested in this, Chef Chris, is because one day I had a meat thermometer in my pocket in the kitchen where I worked. I looked at it, it was 130 degrees where in his work environment. That's horrendous. People were getting sick because they were so hot. And plus the air conditioning was roaring, and it was still that hot because everything gets hot around a gas stove. All that goes away. The ventilation cost, the air conditioning cost, the health risk, all of it goes away if you change the technology.
So there's a really compelling business case for a restaurant, faced with other rising costs, labor, food, to switch to this induction cooking as a way to stay competitive, right?
Absolutely. Without, even if don't give a hoot about climate change, or as but my chef friend explained to me that we're so focused on trying to survive day to day in a business where margins, 10, 15 years ago, it was about 7% margin, and now it's 3 or 4% if you're lucky. They can't afford to think about saving the world. They're trying to save their business and their employees. They don't have to worry about saving the world. This is saving them money. This is saving them time. And the fact that it also is good for the planet and good for the environment, well, that's a bonus. And those are the kinds of solutions I focused on in Total Garbage. Solutions that make economic sense, that keep your family healthier, that just work better, and save you money. And it turns out a lot of really important and game-changing solutions like that are out there, just waiting for us to seize them and to see them. First, you have to see them, then you can see
Yeah.
them.
Yeah. Well, talk about, health. One of the things that, I have a gas stove at home. I prefer it over electric because it seems to work better. I've never tried an induction stove, but that after reading your book, that's what I'm going to shop for next. However, I talk about the health issues because I had no idea, and my wife's like, turn on the fan. I'm like, I don't need the fan, turn on the fan. I never did. So,
Yeah. Well, you're talking about the ventilator above many people's gas stoves, which are never adequate. They're not even designed properly. So if a restaurant tried to open without equipment, they would be closed down immediately for being unsafe. So that's, even if you turn that fan on, it's probably not going to help much. It's so crazy because every gas burning appliance in your house is vented automatically to the outside. If you have a gas clothes dryer, all the exhaust from burning the gas is pumped out of the house along with the hot air. If you own a gas furnace, the fumes, the emissions go up the chimney. And think of any other gas appliance, you would never let those fumes into your house. If they were staying in your house, you'd be in danger, and you would immediately get a repair person. Except for gas stoves. Right in the middle of a house, in the heart of our house, we're burning a fossil fuel. What could go wrong with that, right? Well, it's not the clean fuel that the industry likes to say it is. It emits all sorts of substances that are incredibly bad for us, which is why, and there's very robust science on this, there's a 33% higher risk of triggering childhood asthma and respiratory ailments in any vulnerable population in homes with a gas stove versus homes that don't have a gas stove. If I was a pediatrician and I had a child come to me who was developing otherwise unexplained childhood asthma attacks, I would ask what kind of cooking technology they use. And if it was gas stoves, I'd say you should try not using your gas stove and see what happens. And isn't it funny how those asthma attacks always come around the holiday time of year when that stove is going on extra time for people who love to bake and cook and have feasts? It's no coincidence. And the indoor air pollution from a gas stove is really unhelpful. And in fact, if those emissions were happening to coming out of a factory of some kind and going unfiltered into the outdoors, they could easily be cited for for violating various health and safety codes. There's no regulation of indoor pollution in this country, so there's no protection for you other than your own choices of how you cook.
So you're saying that the air outside our house is more regulated than the air inside our house
Absolutely, absolutely. In this country, not in every country, but in this country.
in the United
Um,
States.
Now,
So
there's a solution for this. It's really expensive to replace your stove, right? I mean,
yeah,
or if you rent, you can't. You could beg your landlord to put in some high-tech stove, and most landlords are going to say, "Really?" I'll tell you what my cousin Dorothy did to solve this problem. She has been suffering with long COVID and had a lot of respiratory issues. She lives in an apartment in New York City, has a gas stove, never thought twice about it. She said, "I read your book." I said, "All right, I got an early copy. I figured my cousin will give me a good review. And she read that. And she said, "Boy, I wonder if this could help me out." So she shopped online and found IKEA had a induction tape countertop induction cooker for $69. She said, "I'm going to give this a try." Again, this is not scientific. Anecdotal report. She said after 2 weeks of hardly ever using her gas stove, a couple times she wanted to bake something in the oven. Other than that, she just used this cooker, and she said, I'm breathing more easily. I'm not having all the wheezing and problems that I had been having before, and I never really realized there might be a link to how I cook. Um, Now, I can't guarantee that that's what solved it, but I've heard many stories like this from other people who've told me, yeah, this has made a big difference for my kids, or this has made a big difference for my husband who has chronic asthma. It's very low investment to say, a bunch of the times I only need one or two burners. I could have one of these countertop induction cookers, which work amazingly well. There's restaurants that use the countertop ones because they like to move stations around for cooking different things, and so they're portable, but they're powerful. You can get a two-burner model too, and 80% of your cooking can get done without firing up the gas.
yeah, you just bust out the stove on special holidays when you need extra burners. Yeah, it seems
Oh,
like
and
a
there's
really
one more tip for the health thing. If you must use your gas stove, don't just use that ventilator fan over it. That's not going to do much for you. A little bit on the back burner, but a lot of them just vent back into the house instead of going outside. So look to see where's your leads. A lot of places it doesn't go anywhere anyway, so it's kind of a joke. Close all the bedroom doors so those emissions don't get in your kids or your bedroom. Just keep them closed when you're running the gas stove. Open the window closest to the where you're cooking, even if it's cold out. And those two things can make a huge difference in your health risks for cooking with gas. And then use that little induction cooker when you can.
that what stood out to me, what I didn't realize is the benzene. The part of the exhaust has
Mm.
benzene in it, which is a carcinogenic substance. Yeah, don't want to breathe.
Yes, the
So
benzene, the nitric oxides that are also lung irritants, and that's what stimulates the asthmatic response
hmm.
and other emissions as well.
So, as an investigative journalist, I appreciate in your books that you go deep on kind of the backstory behind some of this stuff, because there's industry players, there's PR companies, there's lobbyists, all fighting to keep the status quo in place to give us messages that we repeat and we believe, like clean natural gas,
Yeah.
give a hoot, don't pollute, all these things that are out there. So What can you share with us on this podcast that you think people might be surprised by?
Well, I begin the book with talking about plastic pollution, a subject near and dear to your heart, and
Yes.
I start with what was then a surprising fact, although it's become more well known now, that the average American is imbibing about a credit card's worth of plastic every week from the constant uh, flood of waste plastics entering our water, our food, even our air and soil. It's everywhere and in everything, and it's in us. And since the book came out, I updated this for the paperback edition, which just came out. Um, they're finding plastic inside plastic particles, up to 2 teaspoonfuls in people's brains.
Two
Yeah, brain
teaspoons?
tissue of microplastics. Yes, and that this material over time, very preliminary, people who have a higher amounts of this, that's an average figure. People in the higher end of that figure uh, seem to be showing a greater incidence of dementia, Alzheimer's, and Parkinson's disease.
Well,
I mean, these are fossil fuel products all in all our organs. They're finding it in amniotic fluid. So because these microplastics and nanoplastics are getting in that through the placental barrier. And so we have newborn babies who've never had a meal outside the womb having plastic in their poop, in their first poop.
mm,
This is unheard of. I mean, this is also a consequence of our wastefulness and of our choice to take a basically an eternal product like plastic that nature can't absorb or decompose or consume, in the sense that organic material can be, and making it a disposable product, and then having nowhere good to take it. Our recycling system is not what it's been made out to be, not when it comes to plastics, and that's something that people say that, well, we can't not have plastic. We need all this, don't we? And the answer is no. A lot of it we don't need. And particularly, you shouldn't let plastic touch your food. And there's ways to avoid that. If you drink a bottle of water that came to you in plastic, it's going to have 100 times the amount of plastic particles in it than if you just drank tap water or got water in a glass bottle or anything else other than plastic.
I mean, that's sobering. it's
So what?
it's sobering, to
It's sobering,
know,
yes.
yeah, to know that you're just drinking plastic, you're breathing plastic, you're
Your salt and
passing.
pepper shakers have plastic. Your favorite beer has plastic. I mean, it's kind of, we've really dug a bit of a hole for us. So what we can do is not make it worse. And as consumers, we can choose. I'm not going to use saran wrap anymore, or plastic wrap. Not to call out a particular brand, but none of it's recyclable. People think it can be, and they put it in the recycling bin. It doesn't get recycled. It doesn't happen. But oh, I have leftover salad. Keep it in a bowl and put a plate on top of it. You just don't need that plastic wrap. There's ways to keep things fresh without encasing them in a potentially toxic substance. Glass is great. Metal's fine. I mean, there's all sorts of materials available to us that aren't plastic. If, I People say, well, I like soda. I like bottle. I don't like my tap water or my choices. Well, I mean, usually the price point is similar for things that come in cans. I would advise buying them in cans or glass if you can find it. Um, because that at least isn't adding to your body burden of plastic.
So yeah, so there's plastic everywhere, and you point out in your book that plastic is really the only man-made thing out there, besides other petrochemical, substances that, and it never does break down, so
It only gets smaller. The particles break up, and that's how they finally become small enough to um, get into everything, especially ourselves and our food. It's not all just what we throw away into the trash can. It's our plastic clothes. and washing machines. There's only one country in the world right now that requires a filter to capture plastic particles as they get flooded into the waste stream,
So,
water waste stream, and
so
that's
that's an easy
France.
solution, right? Like, I know in California, I believe they're looking to pass a law. The idea is that you wash your synthetic clothes, and the same way that your dryer has a lint trap, you would have a lint trap in your washer to catch the water, the plastic that's in the water coming off your clothes, right?
Yeah, and it's an engineering problem that has a solution. They've been talking about California's been looking at this for I want to say almost 10 years. They still haven't actually done it. There's a lot of pushback. Uh, I don't know. It's going to add $8 cost to a washing machine. We can't have that, right? Um, I That's one of the more frustrating solvable problems that isn't getting solved.
Yeah. Well, I know some solutions, on that front that, that I use is, make sure to try to buy, high quality items that have a lessened ability to, create microplastic, so instead of like a super fuzzy fleece, you know, having something that's
Yes.
more woven, instead of knit, is a way to help reduce that, and then ultimately just with all the fashion out there, buying high quality clothes,
Yeah,
and
fewer and better. Right.
huh? Yeah,
Yeah,
fewer is
fewer and
better.
better.
Yeah, so
You know,
that's one of the R's you talked about. You talked about, the traditional three R's, which is reduce, reuse, recycle, and then in your book you expanded that, to five and then eight. So let's talk about that because I think everyone knows the three R's.
yes. Well, and then another R is rot for composting, and refuse. In other words, you start saying no to little plastic tchotchkes that they give out at some kind of event. Just say no, I don't need that, or those little plastic freebies, or maybe I can look into getting a soda stream and carbonate my own soda. And wow, it turns out that saves you money if you're a big fizzy water or soda drinker. And that gives you a package free option. Or maybe you bring your own produce bags to the supermarket, so that you don't have to use their plastic bags. And there's just a lot of things that we can do that say, I'm going to refuse to take this incredibly wasteful product. And yeah, it's changing the way I do things, but after you repeat it a couple of times, it feels natural and it's no big deal. I mean, there's all kinds of things like that we can do. And then the other R's I added to the list are repair. We just throw things away when they're broken, but actually there's a grassroots movement in cities and communities all over the place where people get together who these repair cafés and or other venues, and share their ability to fix a lamp instead of throwing it away, or help you get your home computer working again. And those kinds of opportunities not only save money and give new life to old things, but it's very satisfying to fix something that you love instead of throwing it away. Um, the other uh, R is repower. And we talked about cars and cooking, and just also how we make our energy is the big kahuna of opportunities for solving all sorts of um, environmental problems, but also national security and energy security problems. Unfortunately, we have a leadership now that's very hostile to anything other than fossil fuels. So we have to look to our states, our communities, and most of all, the choices we make as consumers, uh, that can move markets as well, using the power of our choices and our wallets to affect change. And we're going to need all of that um, to deal with the repower issue. And then the most important thing I put on the number one R is to rethink how we define waste, how we see it, why we don't see it, and really think differently uh, about how wastefulness is a drag on all of us, on our prosperity and on our health. And it's framing some of our environmental problems as problems of waste really opens the door to a much more inclusive conversation, because there's no yay waste lobby out there. I mean, nobody thinks waste is a good thing. And almost every instance where you can reduce waste, it reduces a cost. It's hard to think of one where that's not true. Um, and that's why the most renewably, I found the most renewable farm town in America, and it is absolutely red state, don't care about climate change farm community in Minnesota called Morris. And they realized that their future aligned with focusing on the resources that they had and could control locally of renewable energy, sun and wind. They're making fertilizer from ammonia that's being produced with wind power, so that suddenly something had to import at great cost to keep their crops going is being made locally and in an environmentally benign way, whereas ammonia, the most commonly produced chemical in the world and vital to agriculture all over the world, is done with burning immense amounts of fossil fuel, even though it can also be done with renewable energy. And this, this community voted for Trump 20 plus percent in both elections, and they're very conservative, and they're all in. They have solar energy on every public building. Even their liquor store, which is like a state store, a city store, I guess you would call it, and their motto is "We chill your beer with the sun." Who doesn't want that, right?
I like that.
They've cut their power budget by shifting to LED lighting ahead of everybody. Before anybody else did it, they partnered with the local university and they said, "Our electric bills are killing us." This is before they had all the renewables, and they helped them make this transition to very energy efficient lighting. And this little town of 5,000 saved $100,000 a year on the budget. That's serious money that they could put to good purpose, that they had just been spending to light the streets and their municipal buildings before.
Well, that's
They were all
amazing.
in after that. That's and they've just been amazing. And they're just great people. They welcomed me and showed me what they were doing. And they were so proud of their electric school bus, their electric public buses. Again, this is a total MAGA land sort of town. So what that shows me and should show everyone is that it's these things that reduce our waste are good across the spectrum. It doesn't matter if it doesn't matter to you that they're environmentally beneficial, doesn't have to be the selling point. It sells itself on every level.
I really like that because, there's when you lead with the environmental benefit of something, it tends, it raises questions. Well, it sounds more expensive, or all these things, or it's less effective. Whereas if you lead with waste, it makes a lot more sense. Like you said, who doesn't? There's no waste lobby. I like it. Yeah. So I'm sold. Let's talk about waste more. So
Yeah.
we,
Yeah.
you talked about you're talking about a lot of things that are near and dear to people. You're talking about their cars. You're talking about their gas stoves.
I
Taking
know. I know.
taking gas stoves away from chefs. But there's compelling reasons. You
Well, they're
know
doing it.
that chefs are getting behind because there's an economic real economic incentive for that. What about lawns? So you're talking about lawns. And
Oh, my
it's a
favorite.
symbol of the American dream. What are you talking about, Edward?
Oh yeah, that's again. This is kind of the craziest symbol for wealth that is really dates back to the colonial days, and where the most affluent Americans wanted to emulate the lawns of European royalty to show that they were had high status. Nobody else had lawns then. Nobody wanted lawns. That's a very recent invention since post-World War II of having sort of every home must have a grass lawn. And think about what it really is. It's an invasive species that requires massive amounts of water and chemicals to support it because it's not meant to grow in most places where we're growing it. And it's expensive. And it's boring. It's these green patches. I mean, they're great for fields, for gaming, and football and baseball. That's all great. But who needs to mow that thing every day in front of you? I mean, I'm not a big lawn fan, so I don't see the aesthetics of it. And I found this uh, gentleman, Jemiah Hargens, in Los Angeles, who founded a nonprofit he calls Crop Swap, and Crop Swap LA. And what he does is he gets people to kind of donate their front lawn, and he takes out the grass and he turns it into an urban micro farm. Now he can take and they're beautiful, by the way. It's filled with beautiful vegetables, flowers, pollinating plants. They're people literally stop while they're driving by to look at it and say, "Wow, what is that?" It's not like, "Oh, it's an eyesore. Our property values are going down." And he can feed 40 households with fruit and vegetables delivered every week. It's California, so it's a year-round operation. Every week, with just 1,000 square feet of front yard, formerly grass, and use 8% of the water that the grass consumed. Now, wow, in food deserts where it's really hard to get fresh produce, you're looking at me like you don't believe it.
No, I believe you. I'm just, I'm listening.
So it's such a better use of our real estate in an urban environment. I mean, every house doesn't need to do that, but if every block or two had them, we'd all have incredibly cheap, incredibly healthy produce and vegetables where we need them most. And by the way, none of it comes in plastic once it's picked, and it's all heirloom, beautiful, nutrition-packed produce, which is not what you get at the supermarket. You get factory
especially the
food there.
tomatoes, right? You think about the tomato at the supermarket versus the tomato you can grow at home, and if anyone's never experienced the difference, like that is the game changer right there.
Yeah, yeah. The tomato we get at the supermarket is like some pale imitation that's, like AI trying to write like Mark Twain or something. It's not right. And what you get is in the supermarket, you get tomatoes that are engineered or bred. They're not necessarily genetically engineered, but engineered the natural way, to be durable, to ship well, and to be uniform in appearance. So they all look alike. And that just makes a great picture, and it seems to be appealing to some people. What it's not created for is maximum nutrition or flavor, because you get neither of those. It turns out the things that make every tomato look different and delicate, you drop a supermarket tomato on the floor, it'll probably bounce. You drop a homegrown tomato, it's going to explode with juice and goodness. And that's how you tell where the nutrition is. And it's been, the FDA, not the FDA, the agriculture department did all kinds of tests of nutrition, and found that a homegrown tomato can have 70% more vitamins and minerals and nutrients in it than a factory farmed supermarket tomato. I mean, think about it.
That's amazing.
And the other thing is, there's one thing that a factory farmed tomato has more of than a homegrown tomato, and that's salt. Like up to 9 times as much salt content. The one thing we don't need more of in our very salty diets already. Isn't that crazy?
That is crazy. I thought you were going to say Roundup or something like that.
Oh God, please. So the best thing you can do really for the environment and your nutrition is to grow some vegetables at home. Even if you just live in an apartment and have a little balcony or a window, there's some great little systems that you can grow indoors. If you live in a cold place, there's all kinds of free plans online to do a little inexpensive greenhouse to grow vegetables year round. And it's so much fun. It's a family activity, and you won't believe the, farmers market quality produce in your own home. It's not hard. It's low tech.
I mean, I was thinking about, you were talking about the man in LA that's doing this, and I was thinking to myself, I'm like, a lot of people have gardeners, right? And they come and they mow the lawn and they blow, but they're called gardeners, And I was just like, well, these gardeners, like, what if you spent $300 a month instead of on lawn mowing, on an actual gardener to come and grow you tomatoes? It's instead of then it's like you're saving $300 or probably more on your grocery bill, and you're reducing waste in your budget. And
Oh yeah, I love that.
yeah,
Tomatoes,
so
squash. I mean, there's all the things that you're paying for now. You could have, from seed.
yeah, so all the gardeners listening out there, God, there's a huge opportunity to create some.
There's a little history there too, because people say, "Oh, home gardens, that can't really replace our big, efficient food systems." Well, they're not so efficient, but let's set that aside. During World War II, there was a huge movement. Some people may have read about this. Some people might be old enough to remember it. They called them victory gardens, and basically, Americans were urged to start growing their own produce at home, their own fruits and vegetables as much as they could, so that the output of our major farms could go to food for the troops. You have to remember, during World War II, 1 out of every 8 living Americans was serving during World War II. It's
Wow.
a huge population uh, that left the country, and we had to feed them, but we also had to keep feeding our citizens at home. And during the war years, those vegetable gardens produced over 40% of our nation's produce in people's
Wow.
yards. 40%. And they ramped that up in the space of a year. Phenomenal. And without that, even the outcome of the war might have been different. I mean, it was one of the many vital things that were happening at home. Um, there's absolutely no reason why we can't be doing significant amount of our national food production that way too. It's just we're choosing to grow grass instead, which doesn't even help, pollinators. When a bumblebee flies over a grass lawn, he might as well be flying over the Sahara Desert. There's absolutely nothing there life sustaining for our pollinators, which we also need to worry about.
Yeah, so that's one of the things you brought up is, not everyone's going to want to do a vegetable garden. However, native plants, have their own benefit of, using less water, or no water, as well as attracting butterflies and hummingbirds. And
Yep, yep. They're beautiful and a little wild and untamed, but most people find that aesthetically pleasing.
in my neighborhood, we had a water rebate program where you got paid for every square foot of lawn you removed. And and I know some other communities, where we have water issues, may have similar programs. It was great. So we took out a bunch of lawn and put in lavender. And
Oh, beautiful.
yeah, it's blooming right now, and it's beautiful, and the bees are out, and smells wonderful. So highly recommend it.
I love that.
Yeah. Well, is there anything else you want to leave us with? I know your book has a whole list of tips and tricks and things, that actions people can take. Is there anything off that list that you want to leave the listener with that could, you know, top this off?
Oh, it's all kind of uh, there's something in there for everyone, I guess. Whether you like, oh, I want to, you know, go to find a refill store and not buy so many things in plastic bottles, or I like there's a list in there called How to Be a Marge, and this is a story of a single mom in Maine who worked for a nonprofit and worked for 8 years on trying to get Maine to pass a law that required manufacturers like soda companies and others who make these disposable products to take care of the cost of recycling and collecting them and dealing with them because it was breaking the bank of all these small towns in Maine. They couldn't afford it because, only about 9% of our plastics get recycled anyway, no matter what we do. Why are these companies allowed to foist that problem off onto taxpayers? And so she worked and worked to get Maine legislators to buy into this idea. And she did it by going town to town and finding a local volunteer who was passionate about this, passionate about litter, about plastic pollution. And she called that person her Marge after her first person in a community that helped her with one of her causes. And so he would tell them how to access the legislative process and to become a citizen witness, how to get a letter that will go to the right committee. And she walked them through how to become an activist really in your own community. And I interviewed a bunch of the marches and what they told me is we never knew that we could do this and be heard. It always was this impenetrable process. And Sarah showed us what she unlocked something for us that empowered us. And Maine became the first state to pass this law that other states are now adopting, where producers of pollution, in this case plastic pollution, are responsible for dealing with it, which is as it should be. It always should have
Yeah.
been. But and that citizen involvement, and the power of one person to sort of get it rolling, defeated all the lobbyists from Coca-Cola and all the big brands that didn't want this law to pass. And that's a game changer. And I brought that up with what's the one last thing? Because it shows you we are not helpless and we're not hopeless on all these big issues. We can do that.
Well, that is good advice. Because with so many issues out there, it's important to know that we can take action, we can make change. Extended producer responsibility that you're referring to, is really, I forgot the quote exactly from your book, but it's just changing the billing address for the problem,
Yeah,
right? It's the billing is currently going to the taxpayer, and we're paying for you know the decisions of a big multinational corporation, and really the bill just should be sent back to them. And then if they're paying the bill, then maybe they can make better choices. So I love it.
exactly.
Thank you, Edward.
My
I
pleasure.
appreciate your book and all the tips, and I think it's going to help people find a way to easily move into a new reality where things are better, and it just makes sense to live more in harmony with nature. So thank you.
My pleasure.